Oh hey, you up for some Street Fighter? Yeah. Man, sorry, I forgot I didn't bring my controller today. What do you mean? I've got a stick right here. Oh, I haven't played on stick for years. I play on leverless now. Hey, anyone got a leverless controller he can use? What's this? An iPad? What? With leverless controllers for fighting games getting smaller and cheaper, it's beginning to feel like there's not a lot of reason to spend your money on anything really fancy. Well, enter Brook Gaming, a mainstay in the fighting game community for making pretty much every adapter that you can imagine. They're here with their own controller. It's the Brook Fighter Starburst. And for two main reasons, you're probably going to see this controller popping up more often and people actually carrying them around, because unlike the Attack of the Clones that we've seen over the past couple of years, this controller aims to answer one fundamental question. What if my controller was something that I actually wanted to carry around with me? Now, full disclaimer, Brook sent this controller to me for the purposes of making this video. I don't have to say anything specific about it. I don't have to send it back at the end, and all opinions are my own. Now, we'll be diving into all the specs and details later in this video, but let's jump straight into those main features, which are the reasons why you might want to pick up this particular controller. And I'll start here with this, the flip case. Now, what's really interesting about this case is that it's just like an iPad now. It's got a magnet here which keeps the case closed. You unfold it exactly like you would an iPad, using the magnets to make it stand up at various different angles. Something like this. I actually have my iPad right here, and you can see that it basically does the same thing. So already we've covered two of the main functions of this case, which is to protect the controller from other things in your bag, like keys or your wallet, or just things with zippers on them, any kind of metal things that might scrape the beautiful acrylic surface that you have on the front of a lot of these controllers these days, because they look so nice on the front. You don't really want to scratch them up. But it also protects the buttons. You always run the risk of buttons just being like pulled out like this. Like, I didn't even mean to pull out the key switch with it as well, but fortunately the keycap is stuck on there nice and tight. So just like an iPad or other tablet, you can protect the front of it, but then the other function is that it has this cool feature where you can actually set this up at different angles. And apparently there are 3 different angles that you can set it at. I'm going to be kind of honest with you, I think the angles on the case are a bit of a gimmick, because I also don't think that you should be really playing with your hands at an angle like this. I can't see any way that this would be good for your wrist. But it is nice because I know that some people do like to have an angle on their controller, or maybe if you're playing at a desk and you've got other objects like a wrist rest or something, and that requires you to have things at an angle, it's there if you need it. Another function of this case is that after you've flipped it out, it now acts as a non-slip pad, and you have non-slip padding all over the bottom. In fact, more than all over the bottom. It's like over 120% coverage now, because it's a little bit wider than the actual face of the controller here. It's not super sticky or anything, but it definitely prevents the controller from slipping around if there were like plastic on the back, or if you just want to prevent your controller from like the acrylic or the plastic or the nails from scratching up your desk. The other thing that's nice about having an iPad style case is that because it flips all the way around, you don't need to like pull the cover off and then like put the cover somewhere. And when you're done playing with the controller, you can actually fold it back up like so, and there's a hole in the case so that you can leave it plugged in even when the controller is protected on the front. Maybe you're afraid of other people walking by and, I don't know, dropping objects on the front of your controller and damaging the acrylic or damaging the buttons. If it was still plugged into the PlayStation, there's no way to actually get this into the case without unplugging it from your computer or PlayStation. Not perfectly well thought out, but I like that there is a hole. Okay, it's not actually a separate day. I just got really hot, so I've opened the door and changed it into a t-shirt. Let's talk about the actual controller itself. First of all, this is a cool looking controller, and I'll give you the main reason why I think so in a moment. But as you can see, it's got the acrylic panel on the front, which means you can put your own artwork underneath. They do provide a template on their website, so you can cut it to the exact right shape and size. Obviously, it's still basically a rectangle, but because it has these design ideas, like having the cut off corners, like so, you don't get a lot of sharp edges on it. Plus, you've also got a beveled edge all the way around the controller, which is really, really nice. It feels incredibly solid. I think it's 860 grams or so. So it's not the lightest controller, but it's also not a heavy controller. And speaking of feeling solid, the buttons also feel fantastic. I believe these are Kale Low Profile Chalk V. I wish they would just write it on the switch. Sorry, I just have to look this up. They are Choc V2 switches. That doesn't mean they're better than V1 switches. They're just the other version of the switch, which means it has the plus-shaped stem on the front. As you can also see, they are hot swappable, so you can pull them out at any time. You don't need to remove the acrylic top plate or anything to access these buttons. You literally just pull them straight out. It does also come with a very simple key switch removal tool that you can use to pry them out. And in addition to having comfortable action buttons on the front, you also have comfortable options buttons as well. Now they are very small switches, but they don't hurt because they are actual proper plastic parts that are supposed to be buttons. So you push them, they don't hurt. But on top of the buttons being just comfortable in general, these are actually concave buttons. Now this is 100% personal preference. There is not a better kind of button for anything, but this means that you can actually rest your fingers on the buttons and they just kind of sink into their place. So if you rest your fingers lightly on the buttons, or if you actually put a lot of weight on your fingers on the buttons, they sink right into the correct places, a lot like a gaming keyboard would be. Why don't I just show you a keyboard? Okay, here's a keyboard. You can see it's got actual regular concave keycaps. Fingers are never going to get lost and feel like, oh, I don't remember where my fingers are supposed to be. I have to look down to figure out where they are. You always know exactly where you are. Now, on top of the fact that these buttons are nice and comfortable to press, you also have extra buttons. You have, I believe, R3, L3, and touchpad. And I've saved this for the last feature to show you RGB lighting. No leverless controller these days seems to be complete without RGB lighting. Of the different lighting modes, you can have them all switched off all the time, or you can have the lights switch off when you press them. You can have the lights switch on when you press them. You can have them in a general breathing light, or you can have them marquee from the left to right, or from the opposite direction, right to left. You also have different varying levels of brightness. You can have them switched up all the way super bright, or you can have them turned down all the way super dark. That being said, looking at the manual, I don't see any way to actually assign very specific colors to specific buttons. It looks like this is the way that the lights are set up, so you don't have like a high degree of customization, but you can change the basic stuff. So now that we're on to RGB, we can talk about the main functions of this unit. There is a tournament lock mode that you also access through the function key by pressing function, options, and share. And if you press all three of those at the same time, the PS button, the share button, and the start button will be deactivated. And helpfully, when you're in tournament lock mode, the function switch is also backlit. You also have some degree of touchpad emulation. If you hold down the touchpad button and you press left and right, you kind of emulate pressing the left and the right sides or the middle of the touchpad. There are also 4 separate SOCD modes so that you're not going to have any trouble at tournaments. Basically, there are rules where if you press down and up at the same time, with some rules, you actually get the up direction, and with other rules, you just get nothing. You get neutral, and with some rules, you actually just get both coming out to the game, and the game just has to decide what to do with it. There is a turbo mode as well, which is not very useful in fighting games, especially if you're going to be in a tournament. You're definitely not going to be allowed a turbo feature there, but if you are using a controller like this for scrolling shoot-'em-up games, then you might want to use turbo to make your fingers feel less tired, especially in the retro games that you might be playing. But actually, one of the most important features of this controller is the fact that it's made by Brook, and so it already has their compatibility features built in. Usually, Brook is the company that you go to buy adapters like this. This is a Wingman FGC. It's the adapter that most people use to turn their non-licensed controller or their non-PS5 controller into a controller that works on PS5 or other adapters for Xbox Series S and X. Well, the Brook Fighter Starburst happens to be compatible with both PS5, PS4 and PS3, and also Xbox X Series X and S as well. And that's, of course, in addition to Switch and PC. So normally an adapter like this would cost you something like $40 or $50. Don't remember exactly the price, but that's on top of the controller that you might already be buying. So if you're buying an unlicensed controller, like you can get really cheap ones these days for like $50, you would need to get an adapter as well for something like $45 on top of that. And then your overall cost will be about $100. Now, the Brook Fighter Starburst does cost significantly more at $350, but it does have the functionality of this built into it. And now that we've come to the topic of price, we should probably talk about some of the downsides of picking the Brook Fighter Starburst. But before we do that, let me show you one more feature, which is really cool. In the box to the Brook Fighter Starburst, which is actually quite a nice box, gotta say, I'm quite impressed by this. You also get this. You can put this strap around yourself and you won't actually be able to connect it to your controller, but that's why it comes with these two rings. You hook these two ring attachments to the handles of the controller. You can put this shoulder strap on here and you instantly become the coolest person ever. Kind of reminds me of Typing of the Dead. You can now put your controller away like so, and you can actually bring it places like this. You could even leave it open if you want people to see the design on your controller, which most people probably would do because I think it looks quite cool now. But obviously if you want it to be fully protected, you could leave the cover like so, and then you could have it like this. You could even leave it lit up if you have a mobile battery or something so that people can see the flashing lights. The thing is, with the Victrix Pro FS and the Mad Catz TE2, those are traditional arcade sticks, so even though you can strap them to you, you kind of look insane, like you're walking around with this giant box attached to you. Whereas this kind of looks more like the sort of thing, like it basically looks like a, what do you call it, a clutch? You know, one of those tiny little mini handbags, man bags? You can have it on in front of you like this. I think this is such a simple thing, but by designing the shoulder strap into the controller, not just being like, here's an extra attachment that you can buy which converts your controller into a wearable item, I think this is actually part of the real soul of this controller. By treating it like what it is, an expensive piece of tech, and making sure that it's protected, you almost have a little bit more respect for the item that you're carrying around with you. This isn't just this thing that you throw around because I play video games and, you know, video games are for having fun and I don't have to take them seriously. Like, people make money going to tournaments. Most people don't make any money, but some of the people who get through to the end of the tournament, they'll make a little bit of money. And, you know, this can be serious business and also just gets you in the mood. Like, I'm treating my hobby seriously. It's like, it's okay if the hobby is video games or just like spending time just having fun, because if you're doing it seriously, like you're respecting the art form or respecting the play form or respecting whatever it is you're getting into. I think something simple like building a case into the controller, it's just like a controller that actually is trying to say something. It's like giving you ideas about how it wants to be treated so that you can like treat yourself with more respect as well. And that's just the case. I think on top of that, having this design where it's like, again, not a special attachment, but built in that you can have this shoulder strap on it, it's just like, this isn't just something you can do, this is something you're supposed to do. You're supposed to carry your controller around with you like this. You're supposed to show people this cool thing that you bought, which looks really cool. You may have even commissioned someone to draw some amazing artwork for you and print it on it and you're proud of it. You're showing it here. Or you can even just have it on the back. It's just like, yeah, I'm just standing around. It happens all the time at tournaments, but you just spend a lot of time just standing around because it's nice to like show off this thing. And then also don't forget that one of the main things about the fighting game community is the community aspect. When you go to a fighting game tournament, it's very difficult to not speak to anyone. It's like if you just show up silently, and if you never say anything, then no one even knows that you're there. So you can't even like say, yeah, I'm here for my match. Yeah, at some point, you'll have to raise your hand and say, yep, that's me. And once you've opened your mouth, you're already talking. And then when you've got a talking point, something interesting strapped to you with a cool design, someone's gonna say, yo, sick design, or whoa, who drew that for you, or what controller is that? All these talking points help you kind of like take advantage of actually being in a community as opposed to just this faceless mob of people on social media who just sometimes talk about fighting games but mostly talk about who God knows what else they're talking about. If you actually go to a real event and you have a cool controller kind of strapped to you, you just talk to other people and actually socialize and make friends and make connections and expand your network and realize what fighting games are all about, which is communication. This is supposed to be a review. What am I talking about? Now, in-game, there's really very little to complain about with this controller. They have all the buttons in pretty much exactly the right places you'd want them, plus you have the right kind of response that you'd want. It also has a nice, satisfying sound to it. Every button in every different position on the controller has its own kind of unique character, which is kind of nice. It's like literally a different pitch for every single button. The extra button placement is also in a pretty good position. I would quite like if just this extra button here had actually been up here instead, but putting it down here so that you actually have sort of an extra pinky button where you just like slide your finger over. Like,
I get it. I think it's wrong. I wouldn't put the button here personally, but it doesn't not work. Also, it just clears the very low barriers that some controllers don't seem to clear, which is being able to press 2 buttons at the same time. You can put your fingers, one finger like this, you can actually press across 2 fingers and you don't have like a rim in the middle, like bumping up against your finger, preventing you from like bottoming out the button all the way. I would describe the Starburst as a high performance controller, but it's not like trying to push performance so hard that it starts to feel a bit weird. Like, it's got a very standard feel, but it has a lot of the luxuries that you would associate with a more expensive feeling controller. Let's talk about the downsides of buying this controller as opposed to some of the competition. First of all, the starting price for this controller is $350. Now, this may go down in the future, but at the starting price of $350, you may be wondering, why is it the same price or more expensive than a licensed controller? And honestly, I couldn't tell you. I don't know why it costs more than an actual licensed controller, but you should remember, this is not a licensed controller. It's an unlicensed controller that uses Brook's technology to make it work with PS5. If it actually were a licensed controller, again, most of those start at about $250, $300, $400, then you would probably have a controller that only works on PS5 and PC. You're unlikely to find a licensed controller that works on PS5, PC, and Switch, and you're almost definitely not going to find one that is PS5, PC, Switch, and Xbox Series S and X. It does feel like really refreshing to know that your one controller will be able to handle anything that you come up against. So for the compatibility, definitely that adds about $100 to the price. But even if this were $250, it's still quite a bit more expensive than the other controllers. Well, first of all, it's Brook, so it's a company that has actually existed for a while. There are a lot of leverless controllers that were literally like they didn't exist yesterday, and now they're making leverless controllers today. And it's like, well, if the controller has an issue, what happens to them? Companies appear out of nowhere, they make a thing, it breaks, and instead of fixing it, the company just disappears and then they reappear with a different name somewhere else. So I've talked about this in my Should You Buy a Cheap Controller video. Brook Gaming has kind of single-handedly been holding the fighting game community together by itself for years now, so I have a lot of trust and belief that this company is actually going to continue to exist. A couple of other things I'm not 100% sure about. The button layout is wide. I felt like my fingers were kind of spread out a little bit like this, but as you can see, this is my hand. I'm not stretching out. It's not uncomfortable, but I did notice. I was like, it's interesting. There is also the fact that I don't know if it's available on Amazon.com or not, and so will you have to pay postage on top of that? No word on that. I did check with Brook, and they're not 100% sure yet. And one major downside to getting this controller over a lot of the cheap GP2040 controllers that you can get out there is there's no screen on here. And as you saw while I was trying to demonstrate some of these features to you, you have to hold down this function button and then a bunch of shortcut keys to make things happen. Now, you also have to do shortcut keys on the GP2040, the 2040 controllers, but you can plug them into a computer, make those things, set those things separately, like in the computer interface. And also you have feedback. Because there's no screen, I don't know what I'm pressing. I have no idea what any of these things do. They're not labeled either, and it's different to every other controller I've ever had. But like this time, it's L3, R3, touchpad. Options is right in the middle of these 6 buttons. It's like the button you press all the time. You have to like search like in the middle of this like maze of buttons here. Junk Food Arcades makes a controller called the Snack Box, which I've also made a review about, and that controller also has a Brook PCB on the inside, but you can use an app to control that controller. So even though it's like really confusing, like what does this button do, or what light goes where, like how do I change any of this stuff, I don't think there's a PC interface where you can change it for this. And you have to do it all with these function buttons and pressing like random key combinations. It's really cryptic. But on other controllers, you have like a Bluetooth app. Yeah, do I press function and options, or do I press function, options, and create? Where is the options button? Is it here or is it there? There should be an app. But at the same time, there shouldn't be an app. You know what I mean? Like, it's really annoying that everything has to be connected to the internet and have an app these days. So no app, but also app. But really, more than anything, the real reason you should buy this controller is because this shape makes you want to go, you've got the touch, and just pull it right open. And now I've probably lost 90% of you with that reference. So really, that's everything I have to say about this controller. It does a fantastic job, but maybe at a price that's a little bit higher than I might expect to pay for an unlicensed controller. Overall, though, I think just the design language of this controller, the fact that it's got this case and the fact that you can attach those straps to it and wear it and walk around with it, that's completely won me over, and it's definitely the controller that I would prefer to take around with me, knowing that I have those options. That's all for the Brook Fighter Starburst. I've been NihongoGamer. I'll see you real soon.
Hey, you got some time for some fighting games? Always.